Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. I'm your host, Paul. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Today's date is February 4th, 2025. This is episode 9, and I wanted to thank all the listeners for tuning in, and also I've had some good comments. I've had several emails, several different people sending me different talks and had commented on a lot of the different stuff that we've been doing, and I really appreciate all the feedback. Keep it coming. Also want to announce that we're now not only on YouTube, but we're also on several of the major streaming platforms. I think Audible we're on now, and Spotify, and there are a couple more. I'm going to get a bigger list of all the ones that we're actually on. And today's guest is Chris S. How you doing, Chris?
Great, Paul. Great. How are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. This is for all the listeners, this is our 5th episode. We're on step 5. This is an adequate presentation of the steps, a guide for sponsorship. And Chris is he's been taking us through this. It's just pretty much just another tool for taking a new prospect through the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And how's it going, Chris?
It's going good. It's been a good week. I spent a little time down in Hilton Head, nice, South Carolina over the weekend with some friends.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it was the midwinter conference down there. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of different talks. They've been doing that for quite a while now, huh?
Yeah, 45 years.
Wow. Yeah, I heard a Don P talk on at Hilton Head. It's on the. I just listened to it a few weeks ago, actually. Yeah. Man, we last week we had talked about this upcoming weekend we had this past weekend we had a men's retreat. Dude, it was special. It was the first time. It was our first annual, and it was just special, man. There was 40 of us. You know, over the years we had been to different retreats, and some of them had 100 people, 150, and over the last year or so, I'd been to one that had only like 30 or 40 men, and it was just something about the intimacy of like 30 or 40 men, you know, at a retreat.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. We've done, I've done 26 retreats at a place called the Wilson House in East Dorset, Vermont.
Yeah.
Bill Wilson's birthplace. And some of the retreats were as small as 25 people, some as large as 100. You know, but it's a small, it's a small room. They can't fit more than 100 in there.
Yeah.
But magic happens. The numbers, don't necessarily mean anything, as far as quality is concerned, or how good of a time you have.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. We had a cool group of guys, man, which really means a lot. You know, everyone was on fire for it. Like by the end of the weekend, we all knew the cool part about it too is like over the years, I've had people that I met. That I've met at conferences or retreats or whatever, and I talk to them. I feel like I've known them for my whole life. And like I have friends that I've met years ago that I still talk to on a regular basis, and they live halfway across the country. It's real cool to form relationships like that.
It is. In the last 10, 15 years of my recovery, my recovery community is not bound geographically.
Yeah.
In other words, I've got friends all over the place. Down in South Carolina, there was at least 10 people I knew.
Nice.
And some of them really well. And you see them once a year, once every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But the reconnection, it's like you never missed a day.
That's cool.
You know what I mean? Within the friendship.
Yeah. What'd you do? Did you share your story? What'd you do at the workshop, or what'd you do down there this weekend?
I did a story, and then I was part of a panel. It was a very, very unusual panel.
Huh.
4 people, sitting up behind a table, and we were taking questions from the crowd. I was I had a little contempt prior to investigation.
Yeah.
I was saying to myself, this is going to go south. but people were coming up, and they were saying it was the best panel they'd ever heard. It was really cool.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was funny because at one point this weekend, and out of all the retreats I've been to, some of my favorite ones are the ones where we kind of all break down. At one point this weekend, it was like probably out of 40 men, 38 of us were crying for 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, it's crazy. And that I don't know, there's something special about that. It's kind of a bond that, you kind of break through that phase of like, I don't want to cry. And then you get past it and it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Well, cool, dude. I appreciate you coming on and doing this, man. We're on
Absolutely.
step 5 this week. Yeah.
So just to preface before we even get going, our conversation has led me into thinking about something that I think is very, very important. And that is, if you're working with somebody, try to help them get enthusiastic.
Yeah.
So there are people like us who will travel around and we'll go to conventions and we'll go to workshops and we're not afraid of getting in a car or getting on a plane and going to a recovery event.
Yeah.
And what happens is when you get to those places is most of the people there are what I would call enthusiasts.
Sure.
They're people who really love Alcoholics Anonymous and really love recovery. And when you're in that milieu, when you're a part of that kind of a crowd, I think it really helps because it invigorates your own enthusiasm.
Sure.
And the more enthusiastic you are with this stuff, the better chance you have of surviving alcoholism. It's a given.
It's so funny you're saying this because I was just having a conversation. So let me back up. So this retreat that we just did was our first one. So I'd been to retreats in the past, right? And they were cool in their own little way, but there was something different in them. There wasn't like what you're saying, an enthusiasm. So whenever me and my current sponsor, me and him started going to retreats together about 2 years ago. And it was a completely different vibe, right? And him and his sponsor are real good. They've been doing them for years, so they got like they know a lot of effective ways to, like we also did a panel. There's also other things that we do to kind of jump the vibe off. There's some games and stuff we play as a group at night after the first night. But it was cool because the whole weekend went freaking amazing, right? And at the end of it, people were telling me like, "Oh man, we appreciate it." And I was like, "Dude, all it was is an enthusiasm that these guys have tapped into." And I just jumped on board and was like, "Dude, I want to share this with people." And by the end of the weekend, It was special. It's real special.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're the type of person who has a little home group and 2 or 3 meetings around your area, that's fine. That's completely normal, right?
Yeah.
But by getting enthusiastic and stretching outside of your hometown a little bit, you can really put something together and put some friendships together that are amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Let me ask you this. So, I've over the last couple of years, I've spent like, there's been a handful of times where I take groups of guys through the book or through the steps at a time. And I was just talking to a buddy of mine about like trying to get other people on board with this and I think I shared with you on one of the last episodes. This particular area that I'm in, and I'm in Lebanon, Tennessee, and there's a lot of recovery houses, right? There's, probably 10 recovery houses. So there's a flood of just new people that come in, right? And there's such an unmet need around this area for getting into the book and sponsorship through the big book.
Sure.
That a couple years ago, I seen that there was an unmet need, and I was like, I'm just going to start taking groups of guys through it, and hopefully, like some people, they'll start getting inspired, and it's worked pretty good. So, what's your experience with stuff like that, like taking groups of guys?
My experience with that is about So I've taken a lot of people through the steps one-on-one.
Yeah.
I've taken a lot more through the steps in workshops.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about the people I've taken through the steps on one-on-one.
Yeah.
I'd say 1 in 4 of them take other people through the steps once they've gone through.
Okay.
Right? I wish it was a higher percentage than that.
Sure.
But if you have that kind of a percentage, you are making some change in the world.
Yeah.
Because you're throwing a rock in the pond and the ripples are going out. Like, I'll give you, for instance, down in Hilton Head, I was introduced to 5 of my grant sponsees that I never met.
Wow.
So they were people that I had taken through the steps, who'd taken people through the steps, and they'd heard about me or whatever, right? But we'd never met.
Nice.
And Meatball Joe, all these guys, right? And it was so fun.
Yeah.
It was so fun to meet people who are part of, for want of a better term, let's call it the lineage. Like if you're taking a whole bunch of people through the steps and then they're taking a whole bunch of people through the steps, that's a recovery lineage, And that's, it describes it in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, that you'll be able to create the fellowship you crave.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. You don't do it by starting a meeting. You don't do it by being the coffee maker. You don't do it by taking a commitment into a treatment center. You do it by one-on-one, taking people through the steps. Because what happens when you do that is you are now in the fellowship of the Spirit with another person.
Nice.
Now, let me explain this the way it was explained to me.
Okay.
There's a spirit of the fellowship, and we all feel that when we go to a really good meeting and we walk out. We've got the spirit of the fellowship.
Yeah.
But the fellowship of the Spirit is built on the recovery process.
Right.
You have helped someone recover. And I've got to tell you, you're bonded. I'm not saying I stay in touch with every single person I've ever taken through the steps. I don't. But a huge amount of them are connected to me for life in one way or another. We're going to bump into each other. We're going to text each other. We're going to see each other on Facebook or something. Yeah. And we're in the fellowship of the Spirit together. And when we connect, we have the solution in common. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We've got the solution to alcoholism in common. We don't have listen, I've got a lot of friends where we have the fellowship in common. We've been going to meetings together forever, and that's great. But it's much better to have the solution in common, because you've helped somebody transform their life, and they're helping other people transform their life. Yeah. And it's something that's really exciting and really amazing to be part of.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And one of the things that kind of this past week stood out this past week was when you had given a shout out. What did you say, Glenn Kay? Is that what it was? The guy, the taper?
Yes.
Yeah, when you were giving a shout out, I was thinking about how, when Mark Hewson and Joe Hawk was going through that, early 90s, mid 90s when they were doing
all 96 really was the majority of their workshops.
Yeah.
They probably did 10 that year.
I was thinking about how much that changed, even in 2016 or 2017 when I first started coming in and started listening to tapes and stuff, how much that changed my life. Just because
the recordings,
the recordings,
Like I said, they were ahead of their time, and a lot of people walked out of their workshops thinking that this is some culty, weird thing.
Yeah.
But those recordings started to make an impact, and they're making an impact today.
It's crazy,
they're 30 years old,
yeah.
and they're still making an impact with a lot of people around the country. A lot of people still listen to Joe and Mark.
Oh yeah. And if you think about it, they had the enthusiasm, right? Those guys, they were on fire for it, and it's kind of took off, Yeah, that's good.
Somebody would say, "Hey, Mark, do a workshop in my hometown, Santa Monica or Battle Creek or Louisville or New York City or whatever," and they'd get out there. Somebody would try to get everybody together to come, and really, it was a transformational experience for anybody that was at them.
Yeah.
But the real lasting value was the recording.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I really like to support people like you. You're making lasting testimony to recovery and making that available for people who wouldn't have had the opportunity to even meet you and me. You know what I mean?
Sure. And that's the cool part about it was like, there's, obviously there's doubts or whatever as I'm going through this. And talking to Monty had really helped. Shout out to Monty over at Take 12 Radio. For those who are listening, go check him out. It's he's been doing wonderful stuff for years and years and years. And, he's got, matter of fact, for those that are listening, you, Chris, you and Monty are actually going through the language of the heart, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna finish up in about a month,
Nice.
And we're gonna have about 100 shows.
Yeah.
So really, what we're doing is we're going over every single article in Language of the Heart, which are Bill Wilson's Grapevine writings.
Yeah.
And it's been an extraordinary experience for me. I've always been a Bill Wilson fan. I think he was the principal architect of this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. It's not a lot of writings by Bob. Yeah. Bob's focus was in other areas. Yeah. Bill really was the genius behind what we have today.
Amen.
And I've always really appreciated him. And some of the writing is big book quality, and because it was in some obscure Grapevine article until they published Language of the Heart, not too many people had access to those wonderful writings.
That's true.
So we're really digging in and exploring them, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good. That's going back to him, he's the one that inspired me because, at the end of the day, it's like, when I first started doing something like this, and this is only maybe 2 months that I've been doing this, and I have doubts, like, man, I don't know about this, but then it's guys like him that just kind of remind me of like, man, just keep doing it. It'll manifest. Something will happen, and then I hear stuff like, I was thinking about this past week, like I said earlier, the Glenn Kay goes around and records these recordings and how much that changed the trajectory of all kinds of people's lives, It's just cool, man. It's just a cool way to get it out.
It really did, because Glenn was awake and he recognized exceptional pieces of business, and he would then promote them on his website, and he would go to conferences and conventions and have a table filled with CDs, or back before CDs, cassettes, and he would make recommendations to people. So he had an overwhelming influence. A lot of tapers that have an overwhelming influence on creating the modern vision of a recovery that we're all part of today.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, and for those that are listening too, I'd mentioned the comments and stuff, but I think I left out the email. It's Recovery Recordings 615 at Yahoo. That's if you want to send an email to us here. So. All right, man. Great, man. I love this stuff, man. Let's get rolling with it on step 5.
Yeah, let's dig into step 5. So quick recap. You're working with somebody. Your job is to qualify them. What that means is, if they have alcoholism, convince them they have alcoholism and explain to them what alcoholism is. Help them convince themselves, and that's part of a qualification. And what you do is you go over the main tenets of the first step, which are the allergy to the body, the phenomenon of craving, the obsession of the mind, the inability to quit on a non-spiritual basis, and explain to them, what alcoholic unmanageability looks like, because it's going to be important, because we treat the unmanageability. We don't treat the alcohol. We treat the unmanageability. We treat the character defects. We treat the operational behavior of an individual. So a thorough in-depth understanding of step 1, so that they have the ability to form a conception of alcoholism, and concede to their innermost self that, yes, I'm alcoholic. I'm in trouble exactly like this. And once you've done that, all the rest of the steps are going to be a little bit easier because you've convinced somebody they have a fatal dose of alcoholism.
Right.
So, step two, we describe the solution, and depending on the person, you can go right to God if you want. You can talk about power. You can talk about the power available in Alcoholics Anonymous. Whatever discussion you need to have to convince somebody that we have a solution. We have a solution that's going to work for them because it works for alcoholics. Step three is you get them to commit to going through these steps and to live a spiritual life. That's really what the third step decision is. We went over inventory. The first thing you do after you've made that commitment is you do what they call a moral inventory, which really is an inventory of your grosser handicaps, your grosser emotional and behavioral handicaps, the things that are really screwing your life up. And number one is resentment. Number two is fear or anxiety. And number three is behavioral. How do you treat people? And you in depth, you look at those things. And it's funny. I was down in South Carolina over the weekend. Somebody showed me a different way of the 4-step inventory. And I'm not a slave to any specific format. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, answer the questions to the best of your ability, and you've done a 4-step. But this person showed how they broke out certain columns and wrote a sentence on this and a sentence on that, and then they went over this with their sponsor. They said this is the Charleston way, South Carolina way of going through the 4-step. And I loved it. And if you do it that way, you're right. And if you do it another way, you're right. You know what I mean?
Thank God, right?
Nobody's going to get drunk because they didn't do the exact right 4-step. They get drunk because they don't do a 4-step.
Yeah.
So convincing an alcoholic of that is important as you're working with them. And then the sex ideal. They call it a sex ideal, but really what it is it's a behavioral ideal.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do I want to treat people? How would I like to be treated?
Yeah.
So how do I plan on treating people in the future, especially people that I really care about?
Yeah.
What are the attributes that I'm gonna want to express in my relationship with other people? And we put a list of those together, and there's through all this stuff, there's prayer work. And don't ever skip the prayers. Even if they seem really simple and dumb, there's power in those prayers. Make sure that if it says, we said something like this, you say something like this, because we means you, in this book.
Yeah.
So again, that gets us up to step 5. And step 5 basically starts on chapter 6. I have it on page 72, and it's the chapter Into Action.
Yeah.
So it says, having made our personal inventory, what should we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. So he calls them a lot of different things. He calls them shortcomings. He calls them defects. He calls them obstacles. The best way to vision these things they are what's blocking you off from the best quality of life that's possible for you.
Amen.
These are the things that are blocking you off. And here's the crazy thing, Paul. There's a lot of people that have been in therapy like Woody Allen for like 40 years who have not been able to get past some of this stuff because all they do is talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a recovery program. This is a program of action. And I am telling you, these defects of character can be mastered. One of the biggest lies I was told when I was young was, a tiger doesn't change his stripes. Once you're a jerk, you're always going to be a jerk.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't believe in the concept of positive change. And as well as I do, positive change is all over Alcoholics Anonymous.
Amen.
You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank God. Yeah.
Yeah, really. So in this chapter, I'm not going to read every word in this chapter. It is saying, though, there's reverse promises, and it says trying to avoid this humbling experience of sharing this with another person. Really, that's what you're going to do with your inventory. You're going to share this. It says we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. So really, what this, in simplicity, what this requires is to sit down with a sponsor, a spiritual advisor, a priest, if that's what you want to do. But you need to sit down with somebody and you need to share everything you wrote. Everything you wrote. And you're to try not to throw language in there to justify. None of us want to look stupid. None of us want to look bad, Paul. So I'll say, I resent my brother, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you about my brother. That's the kind of stuff that should be avoided. We're putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, and we're resolutely looking at our own mistakes. And we're sharing in an honest, transparent way, our own mistakes. And that's what they are. The Oxford group called them sins, and Bill thought, we better not call them sins. These are alcohol. These are particularly, upsettable alcoholics. Let's call them defects. Let's call them shortcomings. And so he understands that this is going to be a difficult step. But here's what he said. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods, in like therapy or whatever. Invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. Right. So they call it a house cleaning. Part of the house cleaning is to share all this stuff.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit. We just briefly touch on the house cleaning.
Sure.
What do you just for the listeners, someone that's kind of curious, because when I first heard the word house cleaning, I was kind of curious what they meant by that. What do you think? What do you think they were talking about when there's?
So when you clean a house, you get rid of all the garbage.
Amen.
You know what I mean? Like So we're really trying to do that with our character.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we want to be rid of as many defects of character, shortcomings, things that are blocking us off from our quality of life as we can.
Yeah.
We want a clean house. I guess he's calling us house. He likes to use a lot of these expressions.
Yeah, when one of the first or second times I went through this work, it always caught me up right there. I didn't realize, I think I'd mentioned in the past that it was more of just a confession. I was just sharing this stuff with someone. I didn't realize that the whole object was, to discover the things which had been blocking me, and that changed the vibe of that whole word right there, the house cleaning part.
Yeah, this is stuff we want to be rid of. Any rational human being would want to be rid of it. What we have is we have hesitation being honest with somebody. Well, we have this ego that doesn't want to look bad. We have this self-consciousness that we're trying to overcome that wants to tell us if we share this with them, it's going to go bad. It's going to be bad. They're going to know. Yeah. And that's never the experience. You know what I mean, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, listen, I've heard over 200 fifth steps, and I'll be completely honest with you. The hardest thing about hearing a fifth step for me is staying awake.
Yeah.
I have heard it all before, and the person is like, "Oh my God, I did this to a woman, or I did this to my mother, or I've heard it all.
Yeah.
I've heard it all. We are much more similar than we think we are different.
For sure.
So this is an exercise I've gone through a ton of times, and it's transformational for the person who's doing it. Yeah. And it's transformational because I'm there and I'm listening. And I'm listening in a very non-judgmental way.
Sure.
When I shared my first fifth step with my sponsor, I looked up and I thought he was going to tell me, "You're not getting in my car to go home." We did it at a park, Yeah. I really thought that.
Yeah.
And what he did was he did this. He goes, "Huh, That's not so bad. I'm like, that's not so bad. Did you hear what I told you? But Paul, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure,
They were
sure.
mistakes.
Yeah.
In my heart, I wasn't a horrible person. I did horrible things, when I was drinking.
Yeah.
And he explained it to me like this. He goes, Christian, you're like a campfire that there's no flames or anything, but the coals are glowing. That was you before you took a drink.
Yeah.
You take your first drink, and it's like pouring gasoline on that campfire, and the flames, fly up, and they burn anybody close, and you're trying to put those flames out now. Lighten up on yourself, because I was my harshest critic.
Sure.
I was the worst judge about myself. I trashed my self-esteem, thinking I was this enormous scumbag. Yeah. And this exercise of the fifth step pulled me out of that and showed me I'm not that different.
Amen.
Yeah, I have unique experiences, and I'm a singular human being, but I haven't done anything that people haven't done before me.
Sure.
And,
Yeah, and one of the things that over the last few years that's really helped me was, and I do this with my guys I'm working with too, is we exchange. Like I will share some of my fifth step, some of my past fifth step stuff with a guy, just to kind of open the situation up a little bit, kind of break the ice a little bit. What's your experience with that? Do you ever do anything like that?
Yeah, I really try to get to know somebody before they're going to do a fifth step with me. There's a treatment center down the street that asks people to volunteer for fifth steps, and you walk in, you've never met the guy before in your life, and they read a fifth step with you. And I did that a few times, and it's not for me. I want to be able to give feedback, and if I don't know a little bit about you, I'm afraid to give specific feedback because I don't have the whole picture. I want the whole story. But anyway, it says we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long and happily in this world. Paul, what if we must be entirely honest with somebody for us to live long or be happy? What if that's true?
Yeah.
What if he means that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
So now there's some warnings. We want to be careful who we choose for our fifth step. We want to really be careful who we choose for our fifth step. We want to make sure that they're closed mouth, all right, that they will take this as a confidence, that they will not share any of the information that they hear in your fifth step outside of between you and them.
Yeah.
That's really important. That's why a good experienced sponsor is a good person to choose. A priest is a good person to choose. Those are people who understand confidentiality. That's really important.
Yeah.
The other thing that's important is that they won't change your mind. They won't try to stop you, and that they understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
That they understand what you're doing. This is a life and death matter.
Yeah, it's huge.
This fifth step.
Yeah, and if you're
It's
not talking
it's
to the
life
right
and
person,
death.
sure.
It's life and death. If you don't do it and you're an alcoholic, it basically says you're going to get drunk. So if you haven't done a fifth step and you get drunk, don't be wondering why.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because come on, the information is right there in front of you. It's because you didn't do a house cleaning.
Yeah.
And so you got to be really, really careful. I had an experience once, Paul, where I did what's known as a multiple fifth step. Now it says person or persons.
Yeah.
When you choose the person or persons, so it's giving me the option of doing a fifth step with multiple people at the same time. It's giving me an option to do part of my fifth step with one person and part of my fifth step with another person. Let's say I've got serious criminal stuff, maybe I want to do that part with a priest. So it's giving us that latitude to be kind of discerning about who's going to hear our fifth step. And I took it seriously, and I met with a friend of mine, and he brought a sponsee, and I brought a sponsee, and I did my fifth step in front of 3 other men. Now, if you've never done a multiple fifth step, I'm not real interested in hearing your opinion of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, oh, that's pretty stupid. We're always gonna express our opinion on experiences we've never had,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
That's typical of the alcoholic. But I had some good experience with this and some bad.
Yeah.
The good experience was it was ego deflation like you wouldn't believe.
I bet. Yeah.
I would read something and they would gang up on me. And I walked out of that fifth step with an ego, small enough to mount on the mantle. You know what I mean? It was a great experience.
Nice.
The bad part of the experience was someone shared with other people things that I had covered in the fifth step, and it got back to my wife and a bunch of other people, and that was unfortunate. More unfortunate for the person who shared that outside of the confidence really than me.
Right.
But it learned, it taught me to be more discerning than I had been up to that point in time about who's going to hear this stuff.
Sure. Yeah, and I used to hear Joe Hawk talk about that a lot. Was it Paul Martin? Is that who they'd go to Chicago and do they'd share? There was a group of guys.
Paul was sponsored by the guy who was sponsored by Dr. Bob. Paul Stanley was Paul Martin's sponsor, and I think Dr. Bob sponsored Paul Stanley. And what they would do is someone would come to town and they would put him in a motel.
Yeah.
And they would send in multiple people, and you would read your fifth step. Let's say it'd take an hour and a half to read everything you wrote down in step 4.
Yeah.
And a guy would come in, you'd read it to him. He'd leave, another guy would come in, you'd read it to him.
Wow.
You'd spend a weekend reading your fifth step to like 20 guys.
That's crazy.
That's how he did it.
Wow.
That's how he did it, okay?
Yeah, that's crazy.
If you do it that way, you're right.
Sure.
If you do it with your sponsor and that's it, you're right.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Yeah.
It's all about, different experiences. And a lot of the people that did it with Paul Martin, like Joe Hawk and Mark Houston, got a whole lot out of it, when they did it that way.
Yeah, it's cool. That's good stuff.
So the instruction for step 5, very, very short, there's a lot of preliminary. This is the instruction. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we've taken this step withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. And there's a bunch of fifth step promises that are absolutely awesome, right? But that's really the instruction. Every dark cranny of the past. Sometimes when somebody comes over to do a fifth step and they look just a little nervous, I say something like this. Okay, we're going to get started, but what I want you to share first is the thing you decided not to tell me on the way over here.
Yeah.
And they look at me like, "How did you know?" Because I'm not new at this.
Sure.
You can tell me about the the monkeys and the transvestites or whatever.
Yeah.
You can tell me about that, and it's all going to be good. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it.
Sure, that's funny.
So here's what I want to focus on. Do you want to share anything more on from your experience, Paul, on step 5, like what you've gained from it?
Yeah, man, I tell you, what I really gained from it was just to realize that I wasn't near as bad. Like one of the last ones I did was, it was eye opening because there was something that had been haunting me internally for a while about. Thinking because of something I did in the past with a close family member of mine, my relationship with that person wasn't like, it didn't match up to my ideals, and I was putting it off on the idea that I thought it was because it's something I'd done in the past on a relationship, and my sponsor had, threw this idea out there that showed me how like it was just my ego, you know what I mean, like. The dynamics of the relationship in the begin with was, I'll just share it. It was with my stepson, and he's my stepson. He was 15 years old when he moved in with us, and it was just an interesting dynamic, and the relationship had cleared up. We didn't have any issues, but I still felt like it was like, something in my, I was self-centered, let's put it that way, just turning it all about me, like it was something I did in the past, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just me thinking about me the whole time. So it cleared me up in that. And, really one of the main things was I just realized that other people are just like me, like we all have the same similar experiences, even people that I looked up to that had been sober for a long, long time, and that I looked up to that I thought, there's no way this person's going to be able to relate to me in that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the freedom that I achieved. I had so many secrets. I had so many things that I had done that I was ashamed of, that I thought if everyone knew, I would be ostracized. I would be cast out. I mean, that was my perception. I've done fifth steps, and I'll tell you this right now: there's nothing I wouldn't share on my fifth step with you on this broadcast tonight.
Same here.
Except that it would be in poor taste.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? In other words, it doesn't have any power over me anymore.
Amen.
It doesn't have the power to cripple me emotionally, to cripple my self-esteem or my pride.
Which is a brand new experience compared to what I can.
It's a brand new experience. Yeah, how free do you want to be? Yeah. Share it all. Yeah. Tell the sponsee that the more rigorous and the more honest that they are in this step, the more freedom and the more power they're going to have.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's so true. I mean, it's and that.
Now, what I want to cover now, Paul, if it's all right, I want to cover returning home.
Okay.
This is a piece that a lot of people forget about or they leave out, and it's part of the fifth step. And I believe, if you're going to thoroughly follow the path, if you want to be one of those rarelies that thoroughly follow the path. I would give the instruction after someone has done the fifth step to do this piece, this returning home piece. Yeah. And I'm gonna read the paragraph, and then I'm gonna break it down. All right, it says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we've omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Those are constructive references that may not make as much sense today as they did in 1939. But what they're saying is we're building our freedom and our power. If we skimp on any of these spiritual exercises, we're not going to have the freedom and we're not going to have the power that's available. Yeah. So let me just break this down a little bit. We find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. So what I'll explain to somebody is, can you go home and find a place where you'll be undisturbed, where you could go into an hour's worth of contemplation? No, my family's running. Oh, okay, then I got a bedroom. You're gonna use my bedroom here for an hour, or there's a church, or there's a park. That's important. An undisturbed space. Yeah. And then it says that we carefully review what we've done. It says we take the book and we go basically to page 59, and we read off each of these steps up to step 5. It's an assessment of, it's a progress report, really, is what it is. How have we done? Is there anything that we feel like we didn't do completely? Yeah. So, number 1, we admit we're powerless over alcohol, which means you can't stay away from it and you can't control it when you're drinking, and that your life had become unmanageable. You have to understand the emotional and spiritual unmanageability that comes along with being an alcoholic. And hopefully your sponsor has pointed out a lot of that stuff when you're going through step 1. And step 2, we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, if you still have any doubts, or if you're attaching yourself to an old idea of God, like God, the guy in the white flowing robes up in the clouds, waiting to judge you and send you to burning eternity. If you've got problems with this power greater than yourself, that needs to be revisited, because this is about power. This is about spiritual power. It's less about the attributes and the characteristics of God. Paul, we're not interested in explaining to you all the details of God. What we're interested in is explaining to you that if you don't develop a relationship with God, you're going to die.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we're interested in.
Sure.
Your conception of God comes experientially as you start to move through this.
Yeah, it's funny because this weekend, one of the things that stood out, one of the biggest things that stood out for me, the guy said, I don't understand God, but I do understand relationship. And the relationship, he's in charge. That stood out.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
There's 3 people in my life that I love and I will stick by to my dying day. Well, actually, one of them's dead now. And they had a firm atheism, a firm atheism.
Yeah.
So there's not a thing that happens in the world that can't be explained scientifically, not a thing.
Yeah.
And they had a firm atheism, and they just never would consider another option.
Wow.
And one of those people he's a binge drinker. What'll happen is he'll go a month, he'll go 2, and then for 3 or 4 days he'll be drunker than a hoot owl. Another person ended up in 3 treatment centers last year in a row. You know what I mean? This is somebody who had a lot of time, and the other person is dead. Overdosed. Just couldn't get with a higher power. And if you can't get with a higher power, you can't get with anything.
Yeah.
This whole program is about creating relationship with the divine.
Sure.
And if you don't believe in the divine, you've sabotaged yourself.
Yeah.
So what is the person's conception of God? If they've got any questions, have them talk to you. Yeah. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Are you holding back on anything? Have you made a decision that you're not going to do this or you're not going to do that? Yeah. Let's talk about that. I'll be available after the hour for anything that's a problem with these first 5 steps. I'm going to be available when their quiet hour is done.
Yeah.
4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Did they leave anything off the inventory because they were worried they were going to have to make amends about it? Did they leave anything off the inventory because they just didn't feel comfortable? Those are questions that they need to ask in this quiet hour. And if they did, I've had a few people come back and say, after the hour, Chris, I left something out that I need to share with you. Yeah. Because the quiet hour is very powerful.
Sure.
5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Did you tell me everything? Did you hold anything back? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And all that stuff. All that stuff is important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. I've yet, maybe there was one time where a guy had told me he left something off. I have had times where, like, we went back through the steps again with somebody and they'd forgot this or forgot that. And my first one, I wasn't completely honest, not all at once. I'd felt like by the time I did my 5th step with my sponsor, which he baby stepped me through it. I'd had probably over a year sober when I first did my first 5th step, right? And by that time, and I don't recommend that personally, but it was my experience, and by that time I'd gotten close enough to the man where he already knew pretty much the majority. There was a couple things that I hadn't shared with him, and I did share, but at the end of the day, there was a handful of things that I don't know if I just purposely forgot about it or what, that came up a year or so later,
Sure. I mean, God is merciful. Yeah. He's only going to allow us to come into consciousness about so much. It'd be overwhelming to be conscious of every mistake we've ever made. So I'll give you, for instance, like it was my third inventory before I remember trashing a house that I was renting in Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like it was my third inventory. We rented it, we destroyed this house and then moved out.
Yeah.
You know, so it just didn't come into my consciousness when I was doing my first inventories.
Yeah.
So there's two things about this. They're never going to be perfect and they're never going to be finished. This work.
Sure.
You know, we can finish it to whatever state of consciousness we have right today.
Yeah.
Our insights are going to get deeper. Our understanding is going to get deeper as time goes on. And if we do multiple inventories, or we're really, really conscious of, you know, the exercises in step 10, you know, we're gonna clean it all up. We're gonna clean everything up that you know needs to be cleaned up, and it's going to be like peeling an onion. It's not going to be like flipping a switch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yes, there's a spiritual awakening, but there's also progress. Spiritual progress happens over the course of time.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because when I first had like you know, my fourth year sobriety or fifth year sobriety, when I went back through the 4-step, you know, I was, you know, really involved in the mechanics of it, and it should have been like this, and it should have been like this, and I got a little salty about how I did it in the past, right? And the funny part was, I wasn't considering the fact that, you know, I'm progressing spiritually. I'm you know, 5 years sober now, not, you know, a year sober. The dynamics of it have completely changed. You know, it's funny though, because I thought it was just about the mechanics, like the mechanical part we did wrong. You know, it's like, man, come on now. You know, that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, I think there's spiritual virtue in doing it the way your sponsor asks you to do it.
Amen.
Right? I think there's spiritual virtue in that.
Amen.
You know, this woman Elizabeth is the one who shared with me the Charleston methodology of doing a 4-step, and I was much impressed.
Nice.
I was much impressed with her commitment to do it the way it was explained to her.
Right.
Because, you know, this is somebody who's done inventory a ton of times and did it a bunch of different ways. But when she landed in Charleston was asked to do it a specific way by a Charleston sponsor, that's the way she did it. Yeah. You know, so there's spiritual virtue in following direction.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, real good stuff. Yeah. That's awesome, man. I've really enjoyed this session. I've gained a lot from it. Really enjoyed the way you, one thing that stood out for me earlier was, and I just jotted down a note, but when you were talking about the first step, you were talking about forming a conception of alcoholism. That's good stuff. You know, it's like you come in and you don't really know what alcoholism even looks like. You know, I like how you worded that though, but you know, as you go through this work, you start to form this conception of alcoholism. And is this me? Is this my experience? That's real good stuff. Yeah. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, this is the last thing I'll say. Mm-hmm. If you really want to learn something, you know what you do?
What's that?
You teach it.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, man, I've learned so much through this, and it's and like I said earlier, I've had several guys, you know, talk about how they found this really, really useful. And I had a girl earlier at work today tell me the same thing, that she's been getting her sponsees to listen to it and all this. And yeah, man, it's great. Cool. Yeah, it's been great, and I appreciate you. And tomorrow, I'm super excited about tomorrow because tomorrow we're doing step 1 and 2, me and Katie. That's gonna be cool. Yeah.
Katie's one of a kind and a national treasure.
Yeah.
Please tell her I said hi.
Will do, man. She's just on fire, you know, and she's just on fire. I was super excited. I got to talk to her on the phone earlier, just briefly to kind of catch up. And I've noticed on a lot of recovery pages and on Facebook that she's starting to do some more speaking and stuff. I've seen 2 or 3. I think she was just in New Jersey, either this weekend or last weekend.
Yeah. I was in South Carolina, or I would have seen her.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Jimmy A. I know Jimmy. I've met him several times. And Roger, you know Roger L., the audio guy.
I love Roger.
Yeah,
Roger is. I love him.
I love
He's
Roger.
So great.
Sure. He's a good guy. All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate you, and We will be meeting again. For those that are listening, we will meet up next week and do this same thing. We'll be doing step 6 next Tuesday. It'll be Tuesday the 11th, February 11th. So appreciate you so much, Chris.
Oh, you got it, buddy.
Have a good night, buddy.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.